The auditorium was filled with cheers, but inside me there was only silence. My own granddaughter had looked me in the eye and said, "Don't speak at my graduation." Those words cut deeper than any blade. For a moment, I almost accepted the humiliation, but then something inside me shifted. If she wanted me silent, I would find a way to make my voice louder than the entire room. And when I finally acted, my revenge didn't just break the silence, it stole the spotlight from everyone else. My name is Jackson. I'm 68 years old. And today, I'll show you how even the deepest wound from family can be turned into justice, dignity, and a lesson they'll never forget. But before I share how it all unfolded, I just ask one thing. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let me take you back to that day when my granddaughter thought she could silence me forever. It was a Tuesday morning in early May when Emily called. The kind of crisp spring day that reminded me why I'd spent 40 years teaching in this small college town, watching generations of young minds bloom like the dogwood trees lining our quiet streets. "Grandpa!" Her voice carried that familiar warmth that always made my chest tighten with pride and love. "I have the most incredible news." I set down my coffee mug, the one she'd made me in art class when she was 12 with "World's Best." "Grandpa," painted in crooked blue letters, and leaned back in my kitchen chair. The same chair where I'd helped her with homework for 10 years, where we'd shared countless breakfast conversations about her dreams and fears. "Tell me everything, sweetheart." "I'm graduating summa cum laude. Can you believe it?" The excitement in her voice transported me back 20 years to the 8-year-old girl who used to burst through my front door every day after school, backpack bouncing, eyes shining with stories about her day. My throat tightened with emotion. "Emily, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." But even as I said the words, something felt different. There was a distance in her voice I hadn't noticed before, a formality that hadn't been there when she was younger. When had that started? When had my little girl, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap during Sunday afternoon movies, begun treating me like a polite stranger? "The ceremony's on Saturday, May 20th, she continued. 2 o'clock at the university auditorium. Mom already has her plane ticket from Denver. Mom, my daughter Sarah, Emily's aunt, who'd moved to Colorado 5 years ago for a job promotion. Sarah had been wonderful to Emily, stepping in as a maternal figure after the accident. But lately, I'd sensed something changing there too. Phone. Calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Conversations that shifted when I walked into the kitchen. "I'll be there," I said, trying to match her enthusiasm. "Wouldn't miss it for the world. You know, Emily, I've been thinking about this day for years. Watching you walk across that stage, it's going to be one of the proudest moments of my life." A pause. Brief, but noticeable. "That's great, Grandpa. Listen, I should probably get going. Lots to do before the big day." After she hung up, I sat in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by 20 years of memories. The refrigerator still displayed her honor roll certificates from high school, though they were faded now and curling at the edges. The windowsill held a small succulent she'd given me for my birthday 3 years ago, the last gift that felt truly personal. I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the photo albums I'd kept meticulously updated through the years. Emily's first day of school, when she'd clung to my hand and whispered, "Don't leave me, Grandpa." Her middle school graduation, where she'd insisted I sit in the front row because you're the most important person here. Her high school prom, when she danced with me first before her date arrived, saying, "Nobody will ever be as important to me as you are, Grandpa." When had that changed? When had I become someone she called out of obligation rather than joy? The answer came to me slowly, like storm clouds gathering on a clear day. It had been gradual, so gradual I'd convinced myself I was imagining it. The phone calls that became shorter and less frequent. The visits that shifted from weekly to Monthly to holidays only. The way she'd started checking her phone during our conversations, as if something more important might interrupt us at any moment. But it was more than that. There was something in her voice now. Something I'd heard before in the voices of students who were embarrassed by their parents at school events. A subtle shame, carefully hidden but impossible to miss once you recognized it. I closed the photo albums and returned them to the closet, my hands trembling slightly. At 68, I'd learned to recognize the signs of a heart preparing to break. I'd felt it when my wife Margaret died 12 years ago. I'd felt it when my son David and his wife were killed in that terrible accident 20 years ago, leaving 8-year-old Emily orphaned and frightened. But this felt different. This felt like betrayal. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, remembering the promise I'd made to David and Lisa as they were laid to rest. "I'll take care of her," I'd whispered to their headstones. "I'll make sure she has everything she needs. I'll love her enough for all of us." And I had. God help me, I had. I'd given up my retirement dreams of traveling with Margaret before the cancer took her. I'd worked extra years to pay for Emily's private tutoring when she struggled with math. I'd sold Margaret's jewelry to cover Emily's college application fees and SAT prep courses. I'd taken a second mortgage on the house to pay her university tuition when the scholarships weren't enough. Every sacrifice had felt like a privilege. Every late night helping with homework, every dollar spent on her education, every moment of my own life I'd given up. It had all felt like love made tangible. Now, lying in the darkness of my bedroom, I wondered if I'd been a fool. The graduation invitation arrived 3 days later, formal and impersonal. Mr. Jackson Hayes, printed in elegant script, with Emily's name embossed in gold. No handwritten note, no mention of how much it would mean to have me there. Just the basic information, date, time, location. I held that invitation for a long time, studying every detail. This was it, the culmination of 20 years of raising her, the moment when all the sacrifices would finally feel worth it. I had no idea it would become the moment when everything fell apart. 20 years. That's how long it had been since the phone call that changed my life forever. I was in my classroom that October afternoon, grading papers while the late autumn sun slanted through the windows. Margaret had been gone for 2 years by then, and the quiet rhythm of teaching had become my anchor in a world that suddenly felt too empty. The phone rang at 3:47 p.m. I remember the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, counting down. The minutes until I could go home to my silent house and pretend I wasn't drowning in loneliness. "Mr. Hayes?" The voice was professional, careful. "This is Officer Martinez with the State Police. I'm afraid I have some very difficult news about your son David and his wife Lisa." The words that followed, head-on collision, drunk driver, died instantly, seemed to come from very far away, as if spoken underwater, but it was the next part that brought everything into sharp, terrible focus. "Sir, there's a child, Emily, age 8. She's at Denver Children's Hospital. She's physically unharmed, but she's asking for her grandpa." I was on a plane within 2 hours. When I found Emily in that sterile hospital room, she was so small, in the bed, clutching a stuffed elephant that David had won for her at a carnival the summer before. Her eyes, David's eyes, dark brown and usually sparkling with mischief, were red from crying. "Grandpa?" she whispered when she saw me. "Mommy and Daddy aren't coming back, are they?" I sat on the edge of her hospital bed and pulled her into my arms, feeling her tiny body shake with sobs that seemed too big for someone so small. "No, sweetheart, they're not." "What's going to happen to me?" The question hung in the air like a prayer waiting for an answer. I looked at this beautiful, broken little girl, the last piece of my son I had left, and felt something shift in my chest. Something that felt like purpose, returning to a life that had lost its meaning. "You're coming home with me," I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "If that's what you want." She nodded against my shoulder, her tears soaking through my shirt. "I want to stay with you, Grandpa. I don't want to go anywhere else." The next 6 months were the hardest of my life. Emily cried herself to sleep most nights, and I'd sit beside her bed reading stories until she finally drifted off. She had nightmares about car crashes and would wake up screaming for her parents. During the day, she'd follow me around the house, like a shadow, terrified that I might disappear too. But slowly, gradually, we built something new together. A different kind of family, held together by shared grief and growing love. I learned to braid her hair for school, my clumsy fingers gradually becoming more skilled with practice. I figured out which foods she actually liked versus which ones she'd eat to be polite. I discovered that she was brilliant at math, but struggled with reading, so I spent hours every evening helping her sound out words until they started making sense. The first time she laughed, really laughed, not the polite sounds she made when she thought she should, was 3 months after the accident. We were making pancakes for breakfast, and I'd somehow managed to flip one onto my head instead of the plate. She burst into genuine giggles, and I felt like I'd won the lottery. "You're silly, Grandpa," she said, still laughing as she helped me fish pancake batter out of my hair. "Only for you, sweetheart, only for you." By the time she started 4th grade, Emily had settled into a routine that felt like home. She'd wake up at 7 a.m. and find me already in the kitchen making her favorite breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese and toast cut into triangles. While she ate, I'd help her review her spelling words or check her math homework. After school, she'd do her homework at the kitchen table while I graded papers, both of us working in comfortable silence. Evenings were for reading together on the couch, her curled up beside me while I read aloud from whatever chapter book had captured her imagination that week. The financial strain was significant, but I never let her see it. I took on extra tutoring, work in the evenings after she went to bed. I sold Margaret's car and drove my old Honda until the wheels nearly fell off. I put off house repairs and wore the same 3 suits to work in rotation, but Emily never went without. She had new school clothes every fall, birthday parties with her friends, music lessons when she showed interest in piano. When she wanted to join the youth soccer league, I figured out how to pay the fees, even though it meant eating peanut butter sandwiches for lunch for 2 months. The hardest part wasn't the money. It was the moments when I felt completely out of my depth. When she got her first period at age 12, and I had to fumble through explanations I wasn't equipped to give. When she came home crying because some girls at school were being mean, and I had to figure out how to help her navigate social dynamics I didn't understand, but we figured it out together. Every challenge became something we faced as a team. Middle school brought new complications. Emily started caring about clothes and makeup and boys, subjects I knew nothing about. But she still came to me first with her problems, still trusted me to help her figure things out. "Grandpa," she said one evening in 8th grade, "do you think I'm pretty?" I looked up from the papers I was grading, seeing my granddaughter, really seeing her for the first time in months. When had she grown so tall? When had her face started looking more like a young woman than a little girl? "Emily, you're beautiful. But more importantly, you're kind and smart and funny. Those things matter more than pretty." She rolled her eyes in that way teenagers do, but I caught her smiling as she turned back to her homework. High school was when I started to worry. Not about Emily's grades. She was brilliant, maintaining a 4.0 GPA without breaking a sweat, but about college costs, about how I was going to afford to send her to the kind of school her intelligence deserved. I started working summer school sessions, teaching remedial math to kids who needed extra help. I picked up weekend tutoring jobs. I even took on some substitute teaching at the elementary school during my lunch breaks. Emily noticed, of course. She started talking about community college, about staying local to save money. But I couldn't let her limit her dreams because of my financial limitations. You're going to apply to the best schools, I told her during her junior year. Don't worry about the cost. That's my job to figure out. Grandpa, I don't need to go to some fancy university. The community college here has a great... Emily, I interrupted her gently but firmly. Your parents would have wanted you to have every opportunity. I promised them I'd take care of you, and that includes making sure you can follow your dreams, wherever they lead. That night, I called the bank about a second mortgage on the house. Her acceptance letter to the university arrived on a Tuesday in March of her senior year. Emily ran into the kitchen waving the envelope, her face glowing with excitement. Grandpa, I got in! I actually got in! I felt my chest swell with pride so intense it almost hurt. Of course you got in. You're the smartest person I know. She threw her arms around me, and for a moment she was 8 years old again, needing comfort and reassurance. I can't believe it. Me, going to university, Mom and Dad would be so proud. They are proud, I said, meaning every word. And so am I. So incredibly proud. That was the moment I knew every sacrifice had been worth it. Every late-night tutoring session, every meal of ramen noodles, every dream I'd deferred, all of it had led to this moment when my granddaughter would have the future her parents had wanted for her. Had no idea it would also be the beginning of the end of everything we'd built together. The first semester bills arrived 2 weeks later. Even with scholarships and financial aid, the remaining cost was staggering. But I'd been preparing for this. I signed the mortgage papers without hesitation, using my house, the house Margaret and I had paid off years ago, as collateral for Emily's education. It was worth it. She was worth it. She was worth everything. The change didn't happen overnight. If it had, maybe I would have seen it coming. Maybe I could have prepared myself for the slow erosion of everything we'd built together. Emily started at the university in the fall, and for the first few months, everything seemed normal. She called every Sunday evening, her voice bubbling with excitement about her classes, her professors, the incredible library that had more books than she'd ever seen in one place. Grandpa, you should see this campus, she'd say. And I could picture her gesturing wildly as she talked, the way she'd done since she was little. The buildings are like something out of a movie, and my psychology professor, she's published actual books, real books that people buy in stores. I'd listened to every word, storing away these glimpses into her new world, proud beyond measure, that I'd helped make it possible. During those first months, she still came home every few weekends, filling the house with laughter and stories, making the silence I'd grown accustomed to seem suddenly unbearable in comparison. But by spring, semester, the phone calls became shorter. She was busier, she explained, studying for midterms, working on group projects, getting involved in campus activities, all perfectly reasonable explanations that didn't explain the subtle shift in her tone, the way she seemed distracted during our conversations. How are your classes going, I'd ask. Fine, Grandpa, really good. Tell me about that psychology paper you were working on. Oh, that. Yeah, it went well. I got an A. Where once she would have talked for 20 minutes about her research, about what she'd learned, and how it excited her, now I got summaries, bullet points instead of stories. The first time she brought friends home for a weekend, I understood what was happening. It was a Friday evening in April of her freshman year. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, her favorite lasagna recipe that Margaret had taught me years ago, when I heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Emily's laughter drifted through the window, brighter and more animated than I'd heard in months. This is it, I heard her say, as footsteps approached the front door. It's not much, but it's home. Not much. The words hit me like a physical blow. This house, where she'd grown up, where I'd sacrificed everything to make her feel safe and loved? Not much. Emily entered with 3 other students, all of them looking around my living room with the polite curiosity of visitors in a museum. The furniture was older, yes, but well maintained. The decorations were simple but tasteful. It was a middle-class home in a middle-class neighborhood, exactly what it had always been. But seeing it through their eyes, through Emily's eyes, I suddenly noticed things I'd never paid attention to before. The couch Margaret and I had bought 15 years ago, good quality, but showing its age. The carpet that was clean, but could have used replacing. The kitchen appliances that worked perfectly, but weren't the sleek stainless steel models I saw. In magazines, everyone, "This is my grandfather, Jackson," Emily said, her voice carrying a subtle formality I'd never heard before. "Grandpa, these are my friends from school." The introductions were polite but distant. Madison, whose father was a cardiologist. Trevor, whose family owned a chain of restaurants. Sophia, who mentioned casually that her mother was a federal judge. During dinner, I tried to engage them in conversation, asking about their studies, their experiences at the university. But I could feel Emily's tension, the way she seemed to shrink with embarrassment whenever I spoke. "So, Jackson," Madison said between bites of lasagna, "what do you do for work?" "I'm retired now, but I was a high school teacher for 40 years. Math and science, mostly." "Oh." The word hung in the air, loaded with a judgment I was probably imagining, but felt nonetheless. "That's nice." The conversation moved on to topics I couldn't contribute to. Spring break trips to Europe, summer internships at companies I'd never heard of, social events at the country club. I watched Emily participate in these discussions with an enthusiasm I rarely saw anymore, her face animated in ways that reminded me of the little girl who used to tell me about her day. But she wasn't telling me about her day anymore. She was telling them. After dinner, they retreated to Emily's room to work on what she called a group project. I cleaned up the kitchen alone, hearing fragments of their conversation through the thin walls. "Your grandfather seems sweet," I heard Sophia say. "Yeah, he is," Emily replied, but something in her tone made me pause in my dishwashing. "He's just, very small town. He doesn't really understand what it's like at university." Small town. As if the man who'd sacrificed everything to send her to that university couldn't possibly understand its value. That night, after her friends had gone to bed in the guest room, Emily found me sitting on the back porch, staring up at the stars. "Grandpa, are you okay?" "Just thinking," I said, patting the chair beside me. "Want to sit with me for a while?" She hesitated, actually hesitated, before joining me. When had sitting with me become something she had to think about? "I'm proud of you," I said, meaning it despite the hurt that was growing in my chest. "You found your place at that school. You seem happy." "I am happy," she said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "The university it's opened up so many possibilities I never knew existed." "Tell me about them." She launched into a description of opportunities and connections. Internships with prestigious companies, study abroad programs, networking events with successful alumni. It was a world I'd helped her access but could never truly be part of. "That all sounds wonderful," I said when she finished. "Your parents would be so proud." I meant it as comfort, as connection to the love that had brought us together. But Emily flinched at the mention of her parents, as if their memory was something she'd rather not discuss in front of her new friends. That's when I realized what was happening. Emily wasn't just growing up and growing apart. She was growing, ashamed. Ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of who had raised her, ashamed of the simple life that had been filled with love, but not luxury. The pattern continued through her sophomore and junior years. Phone calls became monthly, then holiday only. Visits home grew shorter and less frequent. When she did come back, she seemed restless, eager to return to her real life at school. I started hearing about her social circle second-hand, casual. Mentions of sorority events, formal dinners, weekend trips to ski resorts, activities that cost money I knew she didn't have, funded by friends whose parents saw $100 dinners as pocket change. "How are you managing the expenses for all these activities?" I asked during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Oh, my friends are really generous," she said quickly, "and I've gotten better at budgeting." But I suspected the truth was more complicated. I suspected she was letting others pay her way, accepting their charity while pretending it was natural, normal, deserved. The worst part was watching her language change. The regional accent she'd grown up with, my accent, the accent of our town, gradually disappeared, replaced by the carefully neutral tones of her educated peers. She started using words like summer as a verb and winter as a destination. She began sentences with "at university," "we," instead of "at school," "I." Small changes, but they added up to a complete transformation of the person I'd raised. By senior year, I felt like I was talking to a stranger who happened to share my granddaughter's face. The girl who used to curl up beside me to read, who brought me dandelions from the yard like they were precious flowers, who told me I was her favorite person in the whole world. That girl was gone, replaced by someone sophisticated and polished, and embarrassed by her own history. The final confirmation came during her last semester, when she mentioned almost casually that she'd been accepted to several graduate programs. "That's wonderful," I said, genuine excitement breaking through my hurt. "Where are you thinking of going?" "Well, there's a great program at Northwestern, and Yale has offered me a fellowship. Columbia has an interesting focus on adolescent psychology." All expensive schools in expensive cities, far from the small town where she'd grown up, far from me. Those are incredible opportunities, I managed. "How are you planning to afford?" "Oh, the fellowship covers most expenses. And I've been saving money, being more careful about spending." Saving money? When had she ever had money to save? Every penny I'd sent for her education had gone to tuition and basic living expenses. Unless... "Emily, have you been telling people you have family money?" The silence on the other end of the phone was answer enough. "It's not like that, Grandpa. People assume things, and it's easier than explaining." "Explaining what?" "That your grandfather worked 2 jobs to pay for your education. That you're here because someone loved you enough to sacrifice everything for your future." "It's complicated," she said, her voice taking on that tone of patient explanation she might use with a small child. "People at university, they don't understand backgrounds like ours. It's just easier to fit in if they think you're one of them instead of one of us." Another silence. Then, "I should probably go. I have a study group meeting." She hung up before I could say goodbye. That night, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by 20 years of memories. The drawings she'd made me still stuck to the refrigerator, the photos of school events and birthdays and quiet moments together. I looked at the evidence of a life built around loving someone unconditionally, and I wondered when that love had become something she was ashamed of. When had I become someone she needed to hide? The graduation invitation, when it arrived, felt like the final insult, formal, impersonal, addressed to Mr. Jackson Hayes, as if I were a distant acquaintance rather than the man who'd raised her. But I told myself I was being oversensitive. This was her big day, the culmination of everything we'd worked toward together. Whatever distance had grown between us, surely that would be bridged by the achievement we'd both sacrificed so much to reach. I had no idea how wrong I was. What are your thoughts so far? I can see this story hitting close to home for a lot of people watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Emily's transformation. The call came on a Thursday evening, 2 weeks before graduation. I was in my study grading final exams from the tutoring students I still worked with to supplement my retirement income when my phone rang. "Hi, Grandpa." Emily's voice sounded strained, formal in a way that immediately put me on edge. "Emily, sweetheart, how are the final preparations going?" "Good. Really good. Actually, that's why I'm calling. We need to talk about graduation day." Something in her tone made me set down my red pen and give her my full attention. "Of course. What about it?" "Well, the thing is," She paused, and I could hear voices in the background, laughter that didn't include me. The ceremony is going to be pretty crowded, and seating is limited for family members. I have my invitation, I said carefully. You sent it 2 weeks ago. Right, yes, of course you can come, it's just... Another pause. Longer this time. Some of my friends' families are having these big celebration dinners afterward. And there's this whole social aspect to the day that's really important for networking and, future opportunities. I waited, a cold dread settling in my stomach. What I'm trying to say is, maybe it would be better if you just came to the ceremony itself. Watch the graduation, take some pictures, and then maybe we could have our own celebration later. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. Like I was an embarrassment that needed to be managed separately from her real life. Emily, I said slowly, are you asking me not to come to your graduation dinner? It's not that I don't want you there, she said quickly, but the words sounded rehearsed. It's just that these events can be kind of formal, and the conversation tends to focus on career networking and graduate school plans, and I thought you might be more comfortable being excluded. That's not what I said. It's what you meant. The silence stretched between us like a chasm that had been growing for 4 years and was now too wide to cross. Grandpa, please don't make this harder than it has to be. This is a really important day for me, and I need everything to go smoothly. Smoothly. Without your grandfather there to embarrass you. You don't understand how important these connections are for my future. The people who will be there, they're not just friends. They're networking opportunities. Their parents work for companies I want to join, graduate programs I want to attend. First impressions matter in these circles. As if she'd been born into them instead of granted access through my sacrifices. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And what impression would I make? It's not about you personally, she said, but I could hear the lie in her voice. It's just that you don't really understand that world. And some of the conversation might be over your head, and I don't want you to feel left out. Over my head. 40 years of teaching, of helping her with every assignment from elementary school through high school, of encouraging her intellectual curiosity and academic success, and now my own granddaughter thought academic conversation would be over my head. What exactly have you told your friends about me? I asked. Another pause. What do you mean? I mean, when they ask about your family, what do you say? I tell them the truth. Which version of the truth? Grandpa, do you tell them that I raised you after your parents died? Do you mention that I took out a second mortgage on my house to pay for your education? Do you explain that every opportunity you've had, every door that's opened for you, was paid for by a man who worked 2 jobs and gave up his retirement dreams? It's more complicated than that. Or do you let them think you come from money? Do you let them assume you're one of them instead of the orphaned granddaughter of a small-town teacher? You're being unfair. Am I? Then tell me exactly what you've said about me to these friends who are so important that you can't risk having me meet them properly. The silence that followed was confirmation enough. I love you, Grandpa, she said finally, her voice small. You know I do, but this is my future we're talking about. These people, these connections, they could change my entire life. I changed your entire life, I said quietly. When you were 8 years old and had nowhere else to go, I changed your life. When you needed someone to believe in you, to sacrifice for you, to love you unconditionally, I changed your life. That's different. How? Because that was about surviving. This is about thriving. About becoming someone important. You think I'm not important? It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that hung between us like a death sentence. Grandpa, please, don't make me choose between you and my future. I'm not making you choose anything, Emily. You've already chosen. But even as I said it, I knew I wasn't ready to accept that choice. Not yet. Not after 20 years of love and sacrifice had led to this moment of complete rejection. There's something else, she said, her voice becoming even more strained. About the ceremony itself. My grip tightened on the phone. What about it? Well, there's a part where family members sometimes stand up to be recognized, or they ask if anyone wants to say a few words about the graduates. And I just think, maybe it would be better if you didn't. If I didn't what? If you didn't. Speak. If there's an opportunity for family to say something, maybe just don't. The words hit me like a physical blow. Don't speak. Don't stand up. Don't be recognized as the person who made this moment possible. You want me to sit there in silence. I want you to be there to share the moment with me. Isn't that enough? To share the moment, while pretending I had nothing to do with making it happen. Grandpa. Emily. I interrupted, my voice harder than I'd ever used with her before. Let me make sure I understand. You want me to come to your graduation, sit quietly in the audience, watch you accept your diploma, and then leave quietly without embarrassing you in front of your important friends. Is that right? You're making it sound worse than it is. How should it sound? Like someone who loves me supporting my future. By erasing myself from your past. By understanding that some situations require discretion. Discretion. As if 20 years of devotion was something that needed to be hidden. I see, I said. Well, Emily, thank you for clarifying what you need from me, so you understand. You'll just come to the ceremony and then, oh, I understand perfectly. Something cold and hard was settling in my chest, replacing the hurt with something sharper. I understand exactly what kind of person you've become. That's not fair. Fair? I almost laughed. You want to talk about fair? Fair would be acknowledging that every opportunity you've had came from someone who loved you enough to give up. Everything for your dreams. Fair would be being proud of where you came from instead of ashamed of it. I'm not ashamed. Fair, I continued, would be introducing me to your friends as the man who raised you, not as an embarrassment to be managed. Grandpa, please. But you know what, Emily, you're right about one thing. This is your big day, your moment to shine, and I wouldn't want to do anything to interfere with that. Thank you, I knew you'd understand. Oh, I understand. I understand. That the little girl I raised, the one who used to tell me I was her hero, is gone. I understand that you've become someone who sees love as a liability and sacrifice as an embarrassment. That's not true. And I understand, I said, my voice growing steadier with each word, that if you want me silent at your graduation, then silent I'll be? Good. Thank you. But Emily. Yes? Silence can be louder than words. Sometimes the most powerful statement is the one that doesn't need to be spoken. I could hear the confusion in her voice. What do you mean? You'll find out. I hung up before she could respond. For a long moment I sat in my study, surrounded by decades of teaching materials and student photos, feeling something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and raw, but it was being overtaken by something else, something that felt like resolution. Emily wanted me silent. She wanted me invisible. She wanted to pretend that her success was her own achievement, unconnected to the man who'd made it possible. Fine. I would give her exactly what she'd asked for. But if 20 years of teaching had taught me anything, it was this, the most important. Lessons are often the ones students don't want to learn, and Emily was about to receive an education she'd never forget. Walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out the folder I'd kept for years. Letters of recommendation I'd written for former students, thank you notes from parents, contact information for graduates who'd gone on to successful careers. Somewhere in that file was a name I needed to find. A young man who'd been in my calculus class 15 years ago, who'd struggled with math until I'd spent countless after-school hours helping him understand. A student who'd been on the verge of dropping out until I'd convinced him he was capable. of more than he believed, a student who'd gone on to graduate summa cum laude from the same university Emily was attending now. A student who, according to the alumni newsletter I still received, would be giving the commencement address at this year's graduation ceremony. Marcus Chen, the boy who'd once told me I'd saved his life, was now in a position to save mine, or rather, to help me save Emily from the person she'd become. I reached for my phone and began to dial. It was time to plan the kind of lesson that would resonate long after the diplomas were handed out. The coffee shop where I'd arranged to meet Marcus was the same one where I'd spent countless Saturday mornings during Emily's high school years, helping her prepare for CETs while she complained about having to wake up early on weekends. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sat in our old corner booth, waiting for the young man who might help me reclaim my voice. Marcus arrived exactly on time. Some habits from high school never change. At 32, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd fought for every achievement, every opportunity. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he still looked like the scared 16-year-old who'd stayed after class every day, determined to pass calculus despite being convinced he wasn't smart enough. "Mr. Hayes," he said, extending his hand with a smile that was genuinely warm. "It's incredible to see you again. Marcus, thank you for meeting me on such short notice." He slid into the booth across from me, and for a moment I saw the boy he'd been, the one whose parents worked double shifts at the textile factory, who wore the same 3 shirts in rotation, who ate free lunch at school and pretended he wasn't. "Hungry on weekends. I have to tell you," he said, "getting your call was like hearing from a guardian angel. I still think about those afternoons you spent with me, trying to drill calculus into my thick skull." "Your skull was never thick, Marcus. You just needed someone to believe in you. You did more than believe in me. You saved my academic career. I would have dropped out of high school if you hadn't convinced me I could handle college math." I studied his face, seeing the success he'd built from that foundation of confidence I'd helped him construct. "And now you're giving the commencement address at one of the most prestigious universities in the state." He laughed, but there was still a trace of that old insecurity in his eyes. "Sometimes I still can't believe it myself. Kid from the wrong side of town, parents who never finished high school, and here I am with a PhD in engineering and my own consulting firm. Your parents must be proud." "They are. They'll be in the front row on Saturday, probably crying through the whole ceremony." His expression softened. "They still talk about you, you know, about how you never gave up on me when other teachers had already written me off." This was the opening I'd been waiting for. "Marcus, I need to ask you a favor, a rather significant one. Anything. Name it." I pulled out the graduation invitation Emily had sent me, sliding it across the table between us. "My granddaughter is graduating in your ceremony." Marcus picked up the invitation, reading Emily's name with interest. "Emily Hayes. She's in the psychology program, right? I've heard good things about her work." "She's brilliant," I said, meaning it despite everything. "I raised her after her parents died when she was 8, spent the last 20 years making sure she had every opportunity to succeed." "That's beautiful. You must be incredibly proud." "I am, but there's a problem." I told him everything. About Emily's gradual transformation, her growing embarrassment about her background, her request that I remain silent during the ceremony. Marcus listened without interruption, his expression growing more troubled with each detail. She asked, "You not to speak," he said when I finished. "After everything you've done for her?" "She's concerned about her image in front of her new social circle. Apparently, having a grandfather who's just a retired small-town teacher doesn't fit the narrative she's constructed about herself." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing what I'd told him. "Mr. Hayes, that's heartbreaking. And frankly, it's disgusting. She's young," I said, though the words felt hollow. She'll hopefully understand someday what she's thrown away. Will she? Or will she just keep moving further away from the people who actually love her? The question hung between us like a challenge. Marcus, I want to ask you to do something that might seem strange, even inappropriate. Tell me. I want you to modify your commencement speech. He raised an eyebrow. How? I pulled out a manila folder I'd prepared containing documents I'd never expected to share with anyone. I want you to tell a story about gratitude, about a teacher who changed a student's life, and about the importance of remembering where we come from. Marcus opened the folder, finding copies of his old report cards, the letter of recommendation I'd written for his college applications, photos from the academic achievement ceremony where he'd thanked me in his speech. I want you to tell our story, I continued. But I also want you to announce something that will surprise everyone in that auditorium. What kind of announcement? I pulled out a second set of papers, legal documents I'd had prepared by my attorney the day after Emily's phone call. I'm establishing a scholarship fund, the Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation, designed to help students from backgrounds like yours, like Emily's, before she decided to forget where she came from. Marcus studied the documents, his eyes widening. As he saw the numbers, Mr. Hayes, this is $250,000. It's my retirement savings, the money I was planning to leave to Emily. You can't do this out of spite. It's not spite, I interrupted. It's purpose. That money will do more good helping students who understand the value of education and family than it would sitting in a trust fund for someone who's ashamed of both. Marcus set down the papers, looking at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. What exactly are you asking me to do? I want you to announce the scholarship during your speech. I want you to tell the story of how mentorship and belief can change a life. And I want you to make it clear that this foundation exists because some people understand that success isn't just about individual achievement. It's about lifting others up and honoring those who lifted you up. You want me to call out your granddaughter publicly. I want you to tell the truth about gratitude, about character, about what really matters in life. Marcus was quiet for several minutes, reading through the documents again. The speech I've already prepared is probably very good, but it's not the speech those students need to hear. They need to hear about substance over style, about character over connections. They need to understand that true success isn't about hiding your past, it's about honoring it. And your granddaughter, she'll know this is directed at her. She'll know exactly what it is. The question is whether she'll have the courage to face it. Marcus leaned back in his seat, studying my face. Mr. Hayes, I owe you everything. My education, my career, my confidence, none of it would have happened without you. But what you're asking me to do is exactly what you would have done for yourself if you'd been in my position. He smiled at that, recognizing the truth in you're asking me to risk my reputation, my professional standing, to help you teach your granddaughter a lesson. I'm asking you to help me teach an entire graduating class a lesson about values that seem to be disappearing from our culture. By using my commencement address as a platform for family drama. By using your commencement address to remind people that education isn't just about personal advancement. It's about using your advantages to help others and honoring those who made your success possible. Marcus picked up one of the photos from his high school graduation, showing him standing next to me with his diploma, both of us grinning with pride and relief. Do you remember what you told me that day? He asked. Remind me. You said that success without gratitude is just sophisticated selfishness. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. I'd forgotten I said that. I never forgot. It's been my personal motto for 15 years. He looked up at me, decision made. What time do you want me to announce the scholarship? Right after, You talk about the importance of mentorship. Make it personal, make it emotional, and make it clear that this is what gratitude looks like in action. Marcus gathered up the papers, sliding them back into the folder. You know, there's a good chance this will backfire. Your granddaughter might never forgive you. She's already decided not to forgive me for the crime of loving her unconditionally. At least this way, my voice will be heard. Through me. Through someone who understands what family loyalty actually means. We spent the next hour going over the details, discussing timing and tone, making sure Marcus understood exactly what I wanted to accomplish. By the time we parted ways, he had everything he needed to turn Emily's graduation day into something neither of us would ever forget. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. For the first time since Emily's phone call, I felt like I had some control over the situation. She wanted me silent. She wanted me invisible, but silence, as I was about to demonstrate, could be the loudest sound in the room. And sometimes the most powerful voice was the one that spoke through someone else's gratitude. Emily was about to learn what happens when you try to silence someone who spent 40 years teaching students to find their voice. The lesson was going to be unforgettable. If you're still with me, I just want to say thank you. This story means a lot to me, and I can tell it's resonating with many of you. The best is yet to come, I promise. The week between my meeting with Marcus and graduation day passed in a strange state of suspended animation. I went through my normal routines, morning coffee, reading the newspaper, tending to the small garden Margaret had planted years ago. But everything felt different, charged with anticipation. Emily called twice during that week, both conversations brief and awkward. She seemed nervous, asking questions about my travel arrangements and what time I'd be arriving at the ceremony. I answered politely, giving her no indication of what was planned. "Grandpa, I hope you understand about the dinner situation," she said during the second call. "It's really not personal." "Of course not," I replied, my voice carefully neutral. "I understand completely." "Good. And you remember what we talked about? About the ceremony itself?" "Oh, I remember perfectly. You asked me to be silent, and I intend to honor that request." I could hear the relief in her voice. "Thank you. I know this is hard, but it means so much to me that you're being supportive." Supportive. As if enabling her shame was an act of love rather than an act of cowardice. "Emily," I said, "I want you to know that no matter what happens on Saturday, I love you. I've loved you since the day you came into my life, and I'll love you until the day I die." "I love you too, Grandpa. And after all this graduation craziness is over, we'll spend some real time together, just the two of us. Just the two of us, after she'd gotten what she needed from her important friends and no longer had to worry about me embarrassing her. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, meaning something entirely different than she thought. Saturday morning arrived grey and overcast, with the kind of heavy clouds that promised rain later in the day. I dressed carefully in my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Emily's high school graduation, where she'd insisted I sit in the front row and had introduced me proudly to every teacher and administrator who would listen. The drive to the university took 45 minutes, through countryside that was just beginning to show the first full greens of late spring. I'd made this drive dozens of times over the past 4 years, visiting Emily during her freshman year when she still seemed happy to see me, delivering care packages during finals week, attending parent events that gradually became less welcoming as Emily's social circle evolved. Today would be my last time making this drive as Emily's grandfather. After today, whatever relationship we had would be fundamentally changed. The campus was buzzing with activity when I arrived. Families everywhere, dressed in their finest clothes, carrying flowers and cameras, their faces glowing with pride and excitement. Graduates in cap and gown moved through the crowds like celebrities, accepting congratulations and posing for photos. I found parking in the massive lot behind the auditorium and sat in my car for a few minutes, watching the celebration unfold around me. Somewhere in that crowd was Emily, probably surrounded by her sophisticated friends and their successful parents, carefully managing the narrative of her background. And somewhere else was Marcus, probably reviewing his speech one final time, preparing to deliver the words that would change everything. The auditorium was impressive, a modern building with soaring glass walls and elegant architecture that spoke of serious money and serious academic ambitions. Inside, hundreds of people were finding their seats, while a string quartet played classical music that added to the formal atmosphere. I found my assigned seat in the middle section, reasonably close to the stage, but not so close that Emily would have to see me clearly during the ceremony. Perfect positioning for someone who was supposed to remain invisible. The seats around me filled with families I didn't recognize, all of them discussing their graduates' achievements and future plans. I listened to conversations about job offers at prestigious companies, acceptance to graduate programs at Ivy League schools, plans for gap years in Europe. "Our daughter is starting at Goldman Sachs in the fall," said a woman behind me. "How wonderful. James is beginning his PhD at Harvard. Full fellowship, of course." These were Emily's people now. This was the world she wanted to be part of, where success was measured by the prestige of your opportunities and the exclusivity of your connections. At exactly 2:01 p.m., the processional began. Faculty members in their colorful academic robes filed onto the stage, followed by graduating students arranged by department. I spotted Emily in the third row of psychology majors, her face serious and composed as she took her place. She looked beautiful. Even from a distance, even through my hurt and disappointment, I felt that familiar surge of pride at seeing her dressed in cap and gown, about to receive the degree we'd worked so hard for together. The university president opened the ceremony with remarks about achievement and future leadership. The provost spoke about the responsibilities that come with education. A student representative gave a speech about gratitude for the opportunities they'd received. And then Marcus Chen was introduced as the commencement speaker. I watched Marcus walk to the podium, every step measured and confident. The applause was polite but enthusiastic. Here was a success story the audience could appreciate, a local boy made good who'd built something substantial from humble beginnings. Dean Morrison, faculty, families, and most importantly graduates, Marcus, began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium's sound system. 20 years ago, I sat where you're sitting today, terrified that I didn't belong in a place like this. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the crowd. This was the kind of inspiring rags-to-riches opening they expected from commencement. Speeches. I was a kid from the wrong side of town, the son of factory workers who'd never finished high school themselves. I'd barely scraped through my senior year, convinced that college was for other people, smarter people, richer people, people who had advantages I'd never dreamed of. I could see Emily in her seat, listening politely but not really engaged. This wasn't her story after all. Or at least, it wasn't the story she'd chosen to tell about herself. But I had something that turned out to be more valuable than money, or connections, or natural ability, Marcus continued. I had a teacher who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. Now Emily's attention sharpened slightly. She couldn't know where this was heading, but something in Marcus's tone must have caught her ear. Mr. Jackson Hayes taught calculus at our local high school. To most people, he was just another math teacher doing his job. But to me, he was a lifeline. I felt my chest tighten as Marcus continued, painting a picture of those after-school tutoring sessions, the patient explanations, the refusal to give up on a struggling student. Mr. Hayes didn't just teach me mathematics. He taught me that intelligence isn't about how quickly you understand something. It's about how persistently you pursue understanding. He taught me that success isn't about where you start. It's about how far you're willing to climb. The audience was listening intently now, drawn into the personal narrative that made abstract concepts concrete. More importantly, he taught me about gratitude, about remembering the people who invest in your future, even when, especially when, you can't see that future yourself. I could see Emily shifting uncomfortably in her seat. The word gratitude in this context had to be making her nervous, though she couldn't yet know why. Mr. Hayes spent countless hours with me, never accepting payment, never asking for recognition. He did it because he believed that education is about more than individual achievement. It's about building a community where success lifts everyone up. Marcus paused, letting his words settle over the audience. When I received my bachelor's degree, I made sure Mr. Hayes was in the front row. When I got my master's, I sent him a copy of my thesis with a dedication thanking him for making it possible. When I earned my PhD, he was the first person I called. Now Emily was sitting perfectly still, and I could see the exact moment when she began to understand what was happening, because that's what gratitude looks like in action. It's not just feeling thankful, it's making sure the people who shaped your success know that their investment mattered. The auditorium was completely quiet now, everyone hanging on Marcus's words, which brings me to an announcement I'm honored to make today. This morning, Mr. Jackson Hayes established the Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation, a scholarship fund designed to help students from backgrounds like mine, students who have the drive to succeed but lack the resources to pursue their dreams. Applause began to build, but Marcus held up his hand. The foundation represents Mr. Hayes's entire retirement savings, $250,000 that he's donating because he believes that education should lift people up, not separate them from their roots. The applause was thunderous now, and I could see people throughout the auditorium turning to look for me, wondering which of the proud family members was the teacher being honored. But my eyes were on Emily, who had gone completely pale. Mr. Hayes could have kept that money for himself, or left it to family members, or used it to fund a comfortable retirement. Instead, he chose to invest it in young people who understand that success comes with responsibility. The responsibility to remember where you came from and to help others follow the path you traveled. Marcus's voice grew stronger, more passionate. Because here's what I've learned in my career. The most successful people aren't the ones who climb the highest. They're the ones who throw down the most ropes for others to climb up behind them. Emily was staring directly at Marcus now, her face a mixture of shock and dawning horror as she realized that everyone in the auditorium was hearing about her grandfather's generosity while she sat there, knowing she'd asked him to remain silent. Soon, Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation will award its first scholarships next fall to students who demonstrate not just academic excellence, but character. Students who understand that education is a privilege that comes with the obligation to help others and honor those who made their success possible. More applause, louder now, as the audience began to understand they were witnessing something extraordinary. Some of you graduating today have been blessed with advantages, family wealth, prestigious connections, opportunities that opened doors before you even had to knock. There's nothing wrong with that, but true success isn't about the advantages you had, it's about what you do with those advantages. I could see Emily shrinking in her seat, understanding that every word was aimed directly at her. Do you use your education to separate yourself from people you consider beneath you? Or do you use it to lift others up? Do you hide your background because you're ashamed of where you came from? Or do you honor the people who sacrificed to help you get where you are? The auditorium was completely silent now, except for Marcus's voice, which carried the weight of absolute conviction. The students who will receive Jackson Hayes scholarships will be chosen not because they're the smartest or the most privileged, but because they understand something that seems to be getting lost in our culture, that gratitude isn't just a feeling, it's a way of life. Marcus looked directly at Emily's section of graduates. So as you leave here today, with your degrees and your bright futures, I want you to think about the people who made this moment possible, the parents who worked extra jobs to pay for your education, the teachers who stayed after school to help you understand difficult concepts, the grandparents who sacrificed their own comfort to ensure you had opportunities they never had. Emily was crying now, tears streaming down her face as the full weight of Marcus's words hit her. Don't just remember them, honor them. Don't hide from your past, celebrate it. Don't be embarrassed by the people who loved you unconditionally. Be proud that you're worthy of that kind of love. Marcus paused, letting his words sink in. Because here's the truth. The measure of your education isn't the prestige of your degree or the salary of your first job. It's whether you become the kind of person who makes the people who invested in you proud to have known you. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by scattered sniffling from audience members who'd been moved to tears. Mr. Hayes couldn't be here to announce his foundation himself, Marcus continued, because someone he loves asked him to remain silent today. But his actions speak louder than any words could. He's shown us what true generosity looks like, what real character means, and what it means to turn hurt into hope. Every eye in the auditorium was searching for me now, and I felt the weight of their attention like a physical force. So, Mr. Hayes, if you're listening, Marcus said, looking directly at my section, thank you. Thank you for believing in a scared 16-year-old when no one else would. Thank you for showing me that teaching is about more than imparting knowledge. It's about investing in human potential. And thank you for demonstrating that the greatest lessons are taught not through words, but through actions. The standing ovation that followed was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Hundreds of people on their feet, applauding not just Marcus's speech, but the message behind it. I remained seated, overwhelmed by the response, until the people around me began looking at me expectantly. Slowly, I stood up. The applause doubled in volume as Marcus pointed toward me from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jackson Hayes, I raised my hand in a small wave, acknowledging the recognition I'd never asked for, but somehow desperately needed. For a moment, I was no longer the embarrassing grandfather who needed to be hidden. I was the teacher who'd changed lives, the man who'd turned his hurt into a gift for others. But my eyes found Emily in the crowd of graduates, and what I saw, they broke my heart all over again. She was sobbing, her shoulders shaking with the weight of understanding what she'd done, what she'd thrown away, what she'd revealed about herself through her shame. The applause finally died down, and Marcus concluded his speech with remarks about the responsibility that comes with education and the importance of using privilege to serve others. But I barely heard the words. All I could see was my granddaughter, the little girl I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, finally understanding the magnitude of her betrayal. As the ceremony continued with the actual conferring of degrees, I sat in my seat and watched Emily walk across the stage to receive her diploma. She looked toward my section once, her eyes red with tears, but I didn't wave or smile or give her any sign of acknowledgement. She'd asked for my silence. Now she had it, but as Marcus had just proven, silence could indeed be louder than words, and the lesson I'd just taught her would echo in that auditorium long after the last graduate had left the stage. The moment Emily's name was called and she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, the auditorium fell into an almost supernatural quiet. Emily Louise Hayes, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, summa cum laude. The applause that followed was polite but muted, nothing like the enthusiastic cheering that had greeted most of the other graduates. It was as if the entire audience understood they were witnessing something beyond a simple degree conferral. They were watching the culmination of a moral lesson that had been playing out in real time. I watched my granddaughter accept her diploma from the dean, shake hands with the faculty members on stage, and pose for the official photograph that would commemorate this moment forever. She should have been glowing with pride and accomplishment. Instead, she looked like someone walking through a nightmare, because every person in that auditorium now knew her story. They knew about the grandfather who'd sacrificed his retirement savings to create a scholarship foundation. They knew about the teacher who'd spent decades lifting up students who needed help. And they knew that this graduate, this young woman, walking across the stage with highest honors, had asked that man to remain silent at her graduation. As Emily returned to her seat, I could see heads turning throughout the graduate section. Her classmates were looking at her with expressions ranging from confusion to disapproval to outright disgust. The girl who'd been so concerned about her social standing, so worried about maintaining her carefully constructed image, had just become a pariah in the very community she'd been trying to impress. The ceremony continued, but the energy had fundamentally shifted. Marcus's speech had reframed everything that followed. When other graduates walked across the stage, people in the audience seemed to be evaluating them differently, wondering about their own stories of family support and sacrifice. When a young man named David Peterson was called, first-generation college student from a farming family, the applause was thunderous. When Sarah Chen received her degree, Marcus's younger sister, who'd followed in his footsteps, people cheered, as if she were a celebrity. But when the children of obvious privilege crossed the stage, the response was notably more restrained. The audience had been awakened to questions about character and gratitude, and they were applying those standards to everyone they saw. Emily had wanted to fit in with the elite crowd, but Marcus's speech had effectively turned the tables. Now, it was the students from humble backgrounds who were the heroes, while those who'd been born into privilege were being judged by how they honored their advantages. The irony was devastating. Emily had spent 4 years trying to join the winning team, only to discover at the final moment that she'd been playing by the wrong rules entirely. As the last degree was conferred and the graduates moved their tassels from right to left, officially becoming alumni, I remained in my seat while families around me began to move toward the exits. I needed a moment to process what had just happened, to understand the full magnitude of what Marcus and I had accomplished. We hadn't just exposed Emily's ingratitude. We'd started a conversation about values that seemed to be resonating with everyone present. Parents were talking quietly about sacrifice and recognition. Students were looking at their families with new appreciation. Even the faculty on stage seemed moved by the message Marcus had delivered. But most importantly, we'd ensured that Emily's graduation would be remembered not for her academic achievements, but for the moral failing it had revealed. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Sarah, Emily's aunt in Denver. "Dad, what the hell just happened? I'm watching the live stream and I can't believe what I just heard. Is Emily really that cruel?" Word was already spreading beyond the auditorium. In the age of social media and live streaming, Emily's humiliation wouldn't be contained to the people who'd been physically present. Her story was about to become much larger than she'd ever imagined. As I finally stood to leave, people began approaching me, parents wanting to shake my hand and thank me for Marcus's speech, faculty members who'd heard about the Scholarship Foundation and wanted to discuss potential recipients, students who'd been moved by the message about gratitude and wanted to share their own stories. Mr. Hayes, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, touched my arm gently. "I'm Dr. Patricia Williams, chair of the psychology department. I wanted to..." tell you that what you've done today, both the scholarship and the lesson you've taught, it's exactly what education should be about. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched by her words. Your granddaughter is brilliant, she continued. One of the most academically gifted students I've taught in 20 years, but brilliance without character is just sophisticated selfishness. The phrase hit me like a physical blow. It was exactly what Marcus had said I'd told him years ago, and hearing it applied to Emily was both validating and heartbreaking. I hope she learns from this, Dr. Williams added. I hope she finds her way back to the values you tried to teach her. As I made my way through the crowd, I caught glimpses of Emily in the distance, surrounded by her friends, but looking completely isolated. The social circle she'd been so desperate to impress was treating her like a pariah. Their expressions, ranging from embarrassment to outright disgust, I could have felt satisfaction at seeing her suffer the consequences of her choices. Instead, I felt only sadness for the little girl who'd somehow lost her way so completely. Near the exit, Marcus found me, his face glowing with the aftermath of delivering what was probably the most important speech of his life. Mr. Hayes, he said, clasping my hand firmly, how do you feel? Like a teacher who just delivered the most difficult lesson of his career, I replied. Any regrets? I looked back toward the auditorium, where Emily was still trapped in conversations, with classmates who now saw her in an entirely different light. Ask me tomorrow, I said. Marcus nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. As I walked to my car through the parking lot, filled with celebrating families, my phone buzzed with another text. This one was from Emily. Grandpa, please, we need to talk. I'm so sorry. Please don't leave without talking to me. I read the message twice, then put my phone away without responding. She'd asked for my silence, and she'd gotten it. Now she could live with the consequences of what that silence had revealed about both of us. The drive home took 45 minutes, but it felt like traveling through a different world than the one I'd inhabited that morning. When I'd driven to the university, I'd been the embarrassing grandfather who needed to be hidden and managed. Now, I was the man who'd turned his heartbreak into a foundation that would help students for generations to come. I was the teacher who'd reminded an entire auditorium about the importance of gratitude and character. I was the grandfather who'd loved his granddaughter enough to teach her the most important lesson of her life, even when it meant breaking both our hearts. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Mrs. Patterson from next door watering her garden. She waved and walked over to my car, her face bright with curiosity. Jackson, how was the graduation? I'm sure you're so proud of Emily. I got out of the car slowly, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years. It was educational, I said, meaning something entirely different than she'd understand. Oh, I'm sure it was beautiful. These university ceremonies are always so impressive. It was certainly impressive, I agreed. Emily learned some very important things today. Mrs. Patterson smiled, completely missing the subtext. Well, you must be exhausted. Big day like that, you should get some rest. Rest, as if I could possibly sleep after what had just happened. Inside my empty house, I sat in my kitchen chair, the same one where Emily used to do her homework, where we'd shared breakfast conversations for 10 years, where I'd received the phone call that started this whole devastating sequence of events. My phone was buzzing constantly now, with messages from people who'd been at the ceremony, who'd heard about the scholarship, who wanted to congratulate me or express their shock at Emily's behavior, but I ignored them all. Instead, I sat in the growing darkness of my kitchen, surrounded by 20 years of memories, and wondered if I'd just won the most hollow victory of my life. Emily had her diploma now. She'd graduated summa cum laude, just as we'd both dreamed. She would when she was 8 years old and crying for her parents. But the cost of that achievement had been everything else that mattered. Her character, her compassion, her connection to the people who'd loved her unconditionally. And now, thanks to my decision to make her shame public, she'd also lost the social standing she'd valued more than family loyalty. The question I couldn't answer was whether I'd saved her or destroyed her. Only time would tell if the lesson I'd taught her today would help her find her way back to the person I'd raised her to be, or if it would drive her so far away that she'd never return. Either way, there was no going back. The little girl who used to call me her hero was gone forever, replaced by a young woman who would have to decide what kind of person she wanted to become. I just hoped she would choose wisely. The phone rang again, but I didn't answer. Tomorrow I would deal with the aftermath of what I'd done. Tonight, I would sit in the silence Emily had requested and listen to the echoes of the lesson that had changed both our lives forever. The silence of Sunday morning was broken by the sound of car doors slamming in my driveway at 7:43 a.m. I was in my kitchen, nursing my second cup of coffee and avoiding the dozens of unread text messages on my phone, when I heard the familiar sound of Emily's voice. Strained, desperate, bleeding. "Grandpa, please, I know you're in there. We need to talk." I remained seated at my kitchen table, the same spot where I'd sat 24 hours earlier, preparing for what I'd thought would be the proudest day of my life. Instead, it had become the day I'd delivered the harshest lesson of my teaching. Career to the person I loved most in the world. "Grandpa, please, I'm not leaving until we talk." Through my kitchen window, I could see Emily standing on my front porch, still wearing the dress she'd worn under her graduation gown. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red and swollen from crying, her carefully styled hair disheveled from what had clearly been a long, difficult night. Part of me wanted to rush to the door, to pull her into my arms and tell her that everything would be okay, that we could find a way past this. But a larger part of me knew that opening that door would undo everything I'd accomplished yesterday. If Emily was going to learn from this experience, she needed to feel the full weight of her choices. My phone buzzed. A text from Emily. "I know you're angry. I know you hate me. But please give me a chance to explain." Hate her. Even after everything she'd put me through, the idea that I could hate Emily was absurd. I was disappointed in her, hurt by her choices, devastated by what she'd become. But hate was impossible. You can't hate someone you've loved unconditionally for 20 years. But neither could I pretend that words would fix what had been broken between us. Another text. "Everyone's talking about yesterday. It's all over social media. They're calling me the most ungrateful person in America. My friends won't talk to me. Even the people who barely knew you are defending you." I set down my phone without responding. If Emily was expecting sympathy for the social consequences of her actions, she was going to be disappointed. She'd spent 4 years crafting an image based on exclusion and superiority. Now she was discovering what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that judgment. The knocking on my front door became more insistent. "Grandpa, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But hiding from me isn't going to solve anything." Hiding, as if my refusal to immediately forgive her was some kind of character flaw rather than a natural consequence of her betrayal. My phone rang. Emily's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail, a third time. This time, I answered, not because I was ready to talk, but because I needed to establish some boundaries. "Emily? Oh, thank God. Grandpa, please let me come in. Please let me explain." "Explain what? Why I said those things? Why I asked you not to speak? It wasn't what you think." "What do I think?" "You think I'm ashamed of you. You think I don't appreciate everything you've done for me, but that's not true." I was quiet for a long moment, listening to her desperate breathing on the other end of the line. "Emily, if you're not ashamed of me, Then why did you ask me not to speak at your graduation? Because... She paused, and I could hear her crying. Again, because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that if you spoke about everything you'd done for me, everyone would know that I didn't deserve to be there, that I wasn't like them, that I was just a charity case who got lucky. The words hit me like a punch to the chest, not because they revealed shame about me, but because they revealed something much worse, shame about herself. Emily, do you hear what you're saying? I'm saying that I was scared and stupid, and I made a terrible mistake. You're saying that you think being loved and supported makes you a charity case. You're saying that having someone sacrifice for your future is something to be embarrassed about, rather than grateful for. No, that's not. That's exactly what you're saying. You've spent 4 years learning to see love as a liability and generosity as something that diminishes your worth. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of her sobbing. Grandpa, I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix it, Emily. Some things can't be undone. Are you saying you'll never forgive me? I looked around my kitchen at the photos of Emily at every stage of her life, at the handmade gifts she'd given me over the years, at the evidence of a relationship that had been built on unconditional love and had been destroyed by conditional acceptance. I'm saying that forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. I forgave you the moment you chose your social status over our relationship, but forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. What consequences? I thought about the scholarship foundation I'd established with my retirement savings, about the students who would benefit from Emily's lesson in gratitude, about the conversation that Marcus's speech had started about values and character. You'll figure that out. Grandpa, please. I'm standing on your porch in yesterday's clothes because I couldn't bear to go home. I've been driving around all night trying to figure out how to face what I've done. My Aunt Sarah won't talk to me. My friends think I'm a monster. The entire internet is calling me the worst person alive. And how does that feel? Terrible. Like my whole world is falling apart. Good. The word came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take it back. Good. Emily, for 4 years, you've been constructing a life based on excluding people you considered beneath you. You've been climbing a social ladder by stepping on the people who lifted you up. Now you're getting a taste of what it feels like to be excluded, to be judged, to be considered unworthy. That's cruel. That's educational, and it's exactly what you needed to experience. I could hear her moving around on my front porch, probably pacing the way she used to do when she was nervous about a test or anxious about a school presentation. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I don't want anything from you, Emily. The time for wanting things from you has passed. I don't understand. For 20 years I wanted your love, your respect, your appreciation. I wanted you to value what we'd built together. I wanted you to be proud of where you came from and grateful for the people who helped you get where you were going. I am grateful." No, you're not. You're sorry that you got caught being ungrateful. You're embarrassed that your ingratitude became public, but you're not actually grateful. You're just scared of the consequences of your lack of gratitude. The truth of those words settled between us like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. "So what happens now?" Emily asked, her voice small and broken. "Now you decide what kind of person you want to be. You can spend your energy trying to convince people that yesterday's lesson wasn't true, that you're really a good person who just made a mistake. You can work on rehabilitating your image and managing the damage to your reputation, or you can actually learn from what happened. You can figure out why you became someone who was ashamed of love instead of grateful for it. You can decide whether you want to spend your life climbing social ladders or building meaningful relationships. Emily was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible through the phone. "Will you help me?" "Help you what?" "Help me figure out how to be the person you raised me to be instead of the person I became. For the first time since this conversation began, I felt something other than disappointment when I heard her voice. Not forgiveness exactly, but something that might eventually grow into hope. Emily, I can't help you become a different person. That's work you have to do yourself. But you could. I could continue enabling your expectation that other people will solve your problems for you. I could make this easier by pretending that good intentions erase bad choices. I could rescue you from the consequences of your actions, the way I've been rescuing you from difficulties your entire life. You're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Another long silence. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Emily, more than you'll ever understand. That's why I can't help you with this, because helping me would hurt me, because helping you would prevent you from helping yourself. I hung up before she could respond, then walked to my front window and watched as Emily sat down on my porch. Steps, her head in her hands, finally beginning to understand the magnitude of the work she had ahead of her. For 20 years, I'd been protecting her from the world. Yesterday, I'd protected the world from her. Now she would have to decide which version of herself deserved to survive. By Monday morning, Emily's story had gone viral in ways none of us could have anticipated. I discovered this when Mrs. Patterson knocked on my door at 8 a.m., holding her tablet with barely contained excitement. "Jackson, you need to see this. Your granddaughter is famous." She showed me her screen, where a video of Marcus's commencement speech had been shared thousands of times across social media platforms. The comment section was a battlefield of opinions about family loyalty, privilege, and gratitude. Teacher gives up retirement savings after ungrateful granddaughter asks him to stay silent at graduation, read one headline. Grandfather's revenge becomes lesson in character at university ceremony, announced another. The story had been picked up by local news stations, then regional outlets, and was now spreading across national media. Emily's name had been revealed through social media detective work, and her photo was circulating alongside articles analyzing what the internet had dubbed the graduation revenge. But it wasn't just the media attention that made the story significant. The scholarship foundation I'd established was receiving donations from complete strangers who'd been moved by Marcus's speech. The university had been flooded with calls from people wanting to contribute to the fund. In less than 48 hours, the Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation had grown from my original $250,000 to over $400,000. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Interview requests from news programs, thank you calls from educators who felt the story highlighted important issues, and messages from parents sharing their own experiences with entitled children. But the call that mattered most came Tuesday afternoon from Dr. Patricia Williams, the psychology department chair who'd spoken to me after the ceremony. "Mr. Hayes, I hope you don't mind me calling. I wanted to discuss something with you about Emily." My chest tightened. "Is she all right?" "Physically, yes, but she's been struggling academically and emotionally since Saturday. She's requested a meeting with me to discuss whether she deserves her degree." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" "She's questioning everything about her achievements, wondering if her success was earned or simply the result of your sacrifices. She's talking about returning her diploma, about giving up her plans for graduate school. This wasn't what I'd intended. I'd wanted Emily to understand the value of gratitude and humility, not to destroy her sense of self-worth entirely." "Dr. Williams, Emily earned her degree. Her grades, her academic achievements, those were the result of her own hard work." That's what I told her, but she seems to have internalized a message that she doesn't deserve her success because she didn't properly acknowledge the support she received. I was quiet for a moment, processing this unexpected development. In trying to teach Emily about gratitude, had I inadvertently taught her to devalue her own accomplishments? "What did you tell her?" "I told her that recognizing the support you received doesn't diminish your achievements. It contextualizes them. I told her that the goal isn't to minimize your success, but to understand that success is rarely achieved in isolation. And how did she respond? She asked me what she should do to make things right with you. The question I'd been dreading, because I honestly didn't know the answer. Dr. Williams, what do you think she should do? I think she should stop focusing on making things right with you and start focusing on making things right with herself. She needs to understand why she became someone who was ashamed of love instead of grateful for it. The phrase echoed what I'd told Emily during our phone conversation, and hearing it from a professional reinforced my belief that this was work Emily needed to do independently. But, Dr. Williams continued, I also think she needs to know that redemption is possible, that people can learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. Are you asking me to contact her? I'm asking you to consider what outcome you're hoping for from this situation. Do you want Emily to suffer indefinitely for her mistakes, or do you want her to grow from them? The question haunted me for the rest of the week. What did I want to happen? I wanted Emily to understand that love and sacrifice weren't burdens to be hidden, but gifts to be treasured. I wanted her to appreciate that her success was built on a foundation of support that deserved recognition rather than shame. I wanted her to become someone who lifted others up instead of climbing over them. But I also wanted my granddaughter back. Not the entitled young woman she'd become, but the loving, grateful child I'd raised. The girl who used to hug me tight and tell me I was the best grandfather in the world. The answer came to me Friday evening when I found an envelope that had been slipped under my front door. My name was written on the outside in Emily's careful handwriting, but there was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. Grandpa, I know you don't want to see me or talk to me, and I understand why. But I wanted you to know that I've withdrawn my applications to graduate school. I'm going to spend the next year working with Dr. Williams to understand how I became someone who could hurt you the way I did. I'm also volunteering with the university's mentorship program, helping first-generation college students navigate their freshman year. I don't know if I can ever become the person you raised me to be, but I want to try. I love you, and I'm sorry. Emily. Below her signature was a smaller note. P.S. I've set up a monthly donation to the Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation. It's not much, but it's a start. I read the letter 3 times, each reading revealing new layers of meaning. Emily wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to convince me that she'd changed overnight. She was simply telling me what she was doing, to address the person she'd become. More importantly, she was doing it without asking for my help or approval. She was taking responsibility for her own growth and development. For the first time since that devastating phone call 3 weeks earlier, I felt something that might eventually grow into hope. The following Monday, I called Dr. Williams. I wanted to thank you for your conversation with Emily, I said. Her letter suggests that she's beginning to understand what needs to change. She's got a long road ahead of her, Dr. Williams replied. Unlearning entitlement and relearning. Gratitude isn't something that happens overnight. No, it's not. But she's committed to the work, and she's asked me to help her understand not just what she did wrong, but why she did it wrong. That's exactly what she needs to do. Mr. Hayes, may I ask you something? Of course. What would it take for you to consider rebuilding a relationship with Emily? I thought about the question for a long time before answering. Time, I said finally. And evidence that she's not just sorry she got caught, but genuinely committed to becoming a different person. How much time? However long it takes. The viral attention gradually faded, but the scholarship foundation continued to grow. By the end of the summer, donations had reached nearly $600,000, and the university had established a formal partnership to administer the fund. The first Jackson Hayes scholarships would be awarded in the fall to 5 students who demonstrated both academic promise and an understanding of what it meant to honor the people who'd supported their dreams. I received updates about Emily through Dr. Williams, who had become something of a liaison between us. Emily was working with low-income students, helping them navigate college applications and financial aid processes. She'd taken a job at a local non-profit that provided educational support to at-risk youth. She was seeing a therapist to understand how she'd developed such a distorted relationship with gratitude and family loyalty. Most importantly, she wasn't asking about me. She wasn't trying to manipulate the situation to force a reconciliation. She was simply doing the work of becoming a better person, without any guarantee that it would repair our relationship. In September, I received another letter. This one was longer, more detailed, and brutally honest about what Emily had discovered about herself through months of therapy and volunteer work. "Grandpa," it began, "I've learned things about myself that are hard to write down, but I think you deserve to know what I've figured out. I spent 4 years at university trying to become someone I thought was better than the person you raised. I was embarrassed by our small town, our modest house, your simple way of speaking. I wanted to be sophisticated and worldly and impressive. But what I really wanted was to feel like I deserved the opportunities I'd been given. Deep down, I felt like a fraud. I felt like everyone at school belonged there naturally, while I was only there because you'd sacrificed everything for me. Instead of being grateful for that sacrifice, I resented it because it made me feel indebted. I thought that if I could convince people I came from money, if I could hide my background, I could finally feel like I deserved my success. But it had the opposite effect. The more I lied about where I came from, the more I felt like an imposter. By senior year, I was so invested in my fake identity that you had become a threat to it. Not because there's anything wrong with you, but because you represented the truth I was trying to hide. When I asked you not to speak at graduation, I was asking you to help me maintain a lie that was eating me alive. I was asking the person who loved me most to make himself invisible so I could continue pretending to be someone I'm not. I know now that what I did wasn't just hurtful, it was evil. It was the kind of casual cruelty that comes from placing your own comfort above someone else's dignity. I don't know if you can ever forgive me. I don't know if I deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand now what I threw away when I chose my fake friends over my real family. I understand that you didn't embarrass me at graduation. I embarrassed myself. You showed everyone what character looks like, while I showed them what ingratitude looks like. I'm trying to become someone worthy of the love you gave me for 20 years. I don't know if I'll succeed, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying. Love, Emily, P.S. Marcus Chen came to speak to the students I work with last week. He told them the same thing he told the graduation audience, that success without gratitude is just sophisticated selfishness. He's right. I was very sophisticated and very selfish. I read that letter dozens of times over the following weeks, studying each word for signs of genuine understanding versus performative remorse. What struck me most wasn't Emily's apology. Anyone could apologize. But her analysis of her own motivations. She wasn't just sorry she'd hurt me. She understood why she'd hurt me, and she understood how that pattern of thinking had corrupted her character more broadly. In October, Dr. Williams called with another update. "Emily has asked me to tell you something," she said. "She's been accepted to several graduate programs, but she's decided to defer for another year. Why? She says she wants to make sure she's going to graduate school for the right reasons this time. She wants to be certain she's pursuing advanced education to serve others, not to elevate herself above them. The maturity of that decision impressed me more than any apology could have. Dr. Williams, how is she doing? Really? She's doing the hard work of rebuilding her character from the ground up. It's not easy, and there are days when she struggles with shame and self-doubt, but she's committed to the process. And the students she works with, they love her. She has a genuine gift for connecting with young people who feel like they don't belong, probably because she understands what it feels like to lose your sense of belonging. In November, I made a decision that surprised even me. I called the non-profit where Emily worked and asked to speak with her supervisor. Mr. Hayes, what an honor, said the director, a woman named Carmen Rodriguez. Your granddaughter has told us so much about you. What has she told you? That you're the man who taught her everything important she knows about education and sacrifice, and that she spent 4 years forgetting those lessons. How is she as an employee? Exceptional. The students trust her completely, probably because she's honest about her own mistakes. She tells them about how she almost threw away the most important relationship in her life because she was ashamed of where she came from. She talks about our situation with the students only when it's relevant to their struggles. Many of our kids feel embarrassed by their family's economic circumstances. Emily helps them understand that family support is something to be proud of, not hidden. I see. Mr. Hayes, may I say something? Of course. Whatever you did to teach your granddaughter this lesson, it worked. She's become one of the most effective mentors we've ever had, precisely because she understands what it costs to lose sight of what matters. After that conversation, I found myself thinking more about reconciliation and less about punishment. Emily seemed to be genuinely changing, not just apologizing for the person she'd been, but I still wasn't ready. Trust, once broken, couldn't be rebuilt overnight, and I needed to be certain that Emily's transformation was permanent, not just a temporary response to public shame. The test came in December, when I received a phone call that would determine everything. Grandpa! Emily's voice was hesitant, nervous, but not desperate the way it had been during her previous attempts to contact me. Emily, I know you asked me not to call, but something happened that I thought you should know about. What happened? I got a job offer, a really good one. A consulting firm in Chicago wants to hire me to work with corporations on employee development programs. The salary is incredible, and it would put me back on the track I was on before. Before everything fell apart, I waited, sensing there was more to the story. But I turned it down. Why? Because taking that job would mean leaving the students I work with here. It would mean going back to the corporate world where success is measured by salary and status instead of impact and service. And you don't want that? I've learned the difference between a career that makes you look important and work that actually is important. The job in Chicago would have made me look successful. The work I'm doing here actually makes a difference. That's a significant realization. It is. And I wanted you to know that I made that choice not because I thought it would impress you, but because it's who I want to be. Emily? Yes? I'm proud of you. The words came out before I could stop them, but I realized I meant them completely. You are? Not for turning down the job. Anyone can make a single good decision. I'm proud of you for becoming someone who would turn down that job, for doing the work to understand your own motivations and choosing character over convenience. Emily was crying now, but they sounded like tears of relief rather than desperation. Does this mean, can we talk? Can we try to rebuild what I broke? I thought about the question carefully before answering. Emily, I think we can start talking about the possibility of rebuilding, but it's going to take time, and it's going to require continued evidence that you've genuinely changed. I understand. Do you? Because I need you to understand that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Our relationship will never be what it was before because we're not the same people we were before. I know, but maybe we can build something new, something better. Maybe we can. For the first time in 8 months, I allowed myself to hope that the little girl who used to call me her hero might still exist somewhere inside the young woman who'd learned to call me Grandpa again. It's been a year now since that graduation ceremony that changed both our lives forever. Last week, Emily and I had coffee together for the first time since before her senior year of college. Not in my kitchen, where too many painful memories lingered, but at a neutral cafe downtown where we could meet as two adults trying to figure out what our relationship might become. She looked different, not just older, but more solid somehow, as if she'd finally grown into herself instead of trying to be someone else. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by the practical attire of someone who worked with kids from tough backgrounds. The carefully styled hair had been replaced by a simple ponytail that suited her better than the sophisticated look she'd cultivated in college. But the biggest change was in her eyes. The hungry ambition that had driven her to reject everything she came from had been replaced by something quieter but stronger: purpose. The first Jackson Hayes scholarships were awarded last month, I told her as we settled into our booth. I know. Dr. Williams told me about the recipients. They sound like amazing kids. They remind me of Marcus when he was 16, smart, driven, but convinced they don't belong in places like university. Like I was convinced I didn't belong, so I tried to pretend I'd always belonged there. Emily's self-awareness had become one of the most striking aspects of her transformation. She could analyze her past mistakes without self-pity or defensiveness, simply stating facts about the person she'd been. "How's the work at the non-profit?" I asked. "Hard, rewarding, completely different from what I thought I wanted to do with my life." She paused. "I'm applying to graduate school again, but this time for social work instead of corporate psychology." "What changed your mind?" "Working with these kids taught me the difference between studying people and serving people. I spent 4 years learning how to analyze behavior so I could manipulate it for corporate profit. Now I want to understand behavior so I can help people change it for their own benefit." We talked for 2 hours about her work, her plans, her growing understanding of what it meant to build a life around service rather than status. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to convince me that she'd completely changed. She simply shared what she was learning about herself and the world. As we prepared to leave, Emily reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this," she said, handing it to me with shaking hands. Inside was a bank statement showing regular donations to the Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation. Not large amounts, but consistent contributions from someone living on a non-profit salary. Below that was a handwritten note. "Grandpa, I know I can never repay what you gave me, but I can try to pass it forward. Every month, when I make this donation, I think about the students who will benefit from your generosity and my stupidity. I hope that somehow some good came from the worst thing I ever did. Emily, you don't need to donate to the foundation," I told her. "I know, but I want to. Not to impress you or earn forgiveness, but because it's the right thing to do." "Emily?" "Yes." "Would you like to have dinner next Sunday at my house?" Her face lit up with a hope so genuine it broke my heart all over again, not with pain this time, but with the possibility of healing. "I would love that." "But Grandpa." "What?" "I want you to know that I don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I know I broke something that can't be completely fixed, but I hope we can build something new." "So do I." As I drove home that afternoon, I thought about the journey we'd both taken over the past year. Emily had lost her fake friends, her prestigious graduate school plans, and her carefully constructed identity. But she'd gained something more valuable: a sense of who she actually was and who she wanted to become. I'd lost the granddaughter I'd raised and loved unconditionally for 20 years. But I'd gained something too. The knowledge that love sometimes requires letting people face the consequences of their choices, even when it breaks your heart to watch. The Jackson Hayes Educational Foundation now provides scholarships to 15 students each year, young people who understand that education is a privilege, not a right, and that success comes with the responsibility to lift others up. Marcus Chen serves on the board of directors, and every year he speaks to the scholarship recipients about gratitude, character, and the importance of remembering where you come from. Emily has asked if she can volunteer with the foundation, helping scholarship recipients navigate their college experiences. I haven't given her an answer yet, but I'm leaning toward yes. Not because I've completely forgiven her, some wounds heal slowly, but because she's earned the right to be part of something larger than herself. The story went viral because people recognized themselves in it. Parents who'd sacrificed for ungrateful children, grandparents who'd been pushed aside when they became inconvenient, young people who'd realized too late what they'd taken for granted. But the real lesson wasn't about Emily's ingratitude or my revenge. It was about the difference between consequences and punishment, between teaching lessons and settling scores. I didn't destroy Emily's graduation to hurt her. I did it to save her from becoming someone who would hurt others the way she'd hurt me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses, even when, especially when, they're someone you love more than life itself. Sunday dinner is still 5 days away, and I don't know how it will go. Emily and I are different people now, shaped by the events of that graduation day and the choices we've made since. We may never have the easy, unconditional relationship we once shared, but maybe that's okay. Maybe some relationships are stronger when they're built on understanding rather than assumption, on earned trust rather than blind faith. Emily spent 4 years learning to be ashamed of love. She spent the last year learning to be grateful for it again. That's progress worth celebrating, even if the celebration is quieter than it used to be. And me? I've learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to face the person they've become and decide if that's who they want to remain. Emily chose to change. That choice gives me hope that Sunday dinner might be the beginning of something new rather than the end of something broken. But even if it's not, even if we can never fully repair what was damaged between us, I know I did the right thing. I taught the most important lesson of my career to the student who needed it most, and in the end, that's what teachers do. We plant seeds and hope they grow into something beautiful, even when we can't be sure we'll be around to see the harvest. Emily's harvest is just beginning. I'm grateful I get to watch it grow. And you, would you have done the same thing I did? Would you have used that graduation day to teach such a hard lesson, or would you have handled it differently? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to choose between enabling someone you love and teaching them a lesson they needed to learn? If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're listening from. Stories like Emily's and mine happen in families everywhere, and sometimes we all need to be reminded that love isn't always comfortable. Sometimes it's just necessary. For another story about family, consequences, and the price of taking people for granted, click on the video in the description. Until next time, remember, the people who love you unconditionally deserve your gratitude, not your shame. Thank you for listening.